This is Chapter 8, Part 3, Planning to Survive, Business Impact Analysis, Business Continuity Plan, and Disaster Recovery Plan. Planning for disasters is part of Business Continuity Management, BCM, which includes both a Business Continuity Plan, BCP, which helps keep critical business processes running in a disaster, and your Disaster Recovery Plan, or DRP, which helps recover the infrastructure necessary for normal business operations. Business continuity management includes not only BCP and DRP, but also crisis management, incident response management, and risk management. Disasters are a sudden, unplanned, calamitous event. It upsets an organization's ability to provide critical business functions and causes great damage or loss. Examples include extreme weather like Hurricane Katrina or Hurricane Matthew or Hurricane Maria, criminal activity, including the theft of credit card numbers at e-commerce sites, civil unrest, terrorist acts. An example is the bombing of the World Trade Center on 9/11. Operational example is the electrical blackout of the northeastern U.S. in August of 2003. Application failure. An example is the software error that caused the Knight Capital Group to lose over $440 million in 2012. The disaster crippled the firm and almost bankrupted it. And of course, the most recent example is the coronavirus pandemic, which definitely can be considered to be a disaster. Terminology: business impact analysis. Analysis of the business to determine what kinds of events will have an impact on what systems. Business impact analysis is don't focus just on the effects on information systems and IT infrastructure. A business with a supply chain disaster, a warehouse fire, or a trucking strike could easily suffer a major impact that has absolutely nothing to do with technology. Critical business function. Once the BIA has identified the business systems that an incident will affect, you must rank the systems from most to least critical. Maximum allowable downtime. This is important. Or maximum tolerable downtime. The most time a business can survive without a particular critical system. Recovery time objective. The time frame for restoring a critical business function. It must be less than or equal to the maximum tolerable downtime. Now again, this is for a critical business function. This is not for data. I want to make a point about that. The RTO relates to business functions, not data. On the other hand, the recovery point objective does relate to data. Incidents can cause a loss of data. You must be able to calculate the amount of tolerable data loss for each business function. Here, recovery procedures must be able to meet the minimums defined. For example, if a business can afford to lose up to 1 day's worth of data, then nightly backups might be an acceptable solution. Emergency Operations Center, the place where the recovery team will meet and work together. So how the maximum tolerable downtime and the recovery time objective work together. An example, power goes out to the data center. It takes 6 hours to move to the alternate site, the recovery time objective for the business function. Business can survive for 9 hours without a functioning data center. At this point, there is an event, but not yet an incident that you can define as a disaster. If you expect power to return in 3 hours, the MTD minus the RTO, you might not even declare a disaster. But if that power is still out at the 3-hour mark, it's time to declare a disaster. So in this example, the 3-hour mark is a critical milestone. What if the organization chose not to switch operations to the alternate site at the 3-hour mark? What if it waited 4 hours? Because it takes 6 hours to switch over to the alternate site, the organization will suffer a loss of 10 hours, which is beyond the maximum tolerable downtime of 9. What would be the effect of this? While a single hour may not seem like much, it may be that the data center provides services to other organizations. Service level agreements, SLAs, dictate outages no longer than 9 hours, with monetary penalties for longer outages. That extra hour could cost the organization tens of thousands of dollars. So when you assess maximum allowable downtime, you need to determine the MTD by business requirements. This is closely associated with RTOs of several integrated functions. Example, a website hosted by an organization for e-commerce. Web servers depend on network services, internet service provider availability, and electricity. Each of these will have its own incident-dependent RTO, but will be associated with the maximum tolerable downtime. For example, if you determine that the website had an MTD of 4 hours, the RTO of the failed network services, ISP availability, and electricity all must be less than 4 hours. The RPO defines the amount of tolerable data loss, and the RPO can come from the business impact analysis or sometimes from a government mandate. So let's talk about the business impact analysis. It is a study that identifies the critical business functions and the MAOs of a disaster recovery plan. Studies include interviews, surveys, meetings, and so on. Identifies the impact of the business if one or more IT functions fails, and identifies the priority of different critical systems. The elements of a business impact analysis include the scope. It is affected by the size of the organization. It defines the boundaries of the plan. For a small organization, the scope could include the entire organization. For large organizations, the scope may include only certain areas. The objectives identify the impact of outages, identify critical functions that can affect the organization. BIA uses the same terms as DRP. Critical business function, MAO, RTO, all those same terminologies are used in a business impact analysis. It determines the extent of impact of a particular incident would have on business operations over time. It drives the choice of recovery strategy and the critical business functions. It asks 2 questions: what can affect the business, and how will it affect the business? A successful business impact analysis maps the context, critical business functions, and the processes on which they rely. It considers all the impacts, including those that are hard and less obvious. Different incidents require different recovery strategies. Fire in the accounting department may call for outsourcing in temporary quarters. A flood in the basement may activate a service bureau plan. You conduct a business impact analysis for 3 reasons: to set the value of each business unit or resource as it relates to how the entire organization operates, to identify the critical needs to develop a business recovery plan, and to set the order of priority for restoring the organization's functions after a disruption. The speed of impact and critical dependencies. Some incidents become more significant over time. The slow deterioration, for example, the slow deterioration of a critical processing facility might generate a disaster. The continuous installation of new devices in a computer room might overtax the electric supply capacity and cause a blackout or fire. Some systems are more important during certain times of the year. A company that supplies heating oil is busier in the winter. Even the smallest outage in the winter can jeopardize its service agreements. Critical dependencies. The business impact analysis must identify what your organization needs to support a company's critical operations, including information processing, personnel, communications, equipment, facilities, other organizational functions, vendors and suppliers, which vendors and suppliers are usually the same, but in any case, those are critical dependencies. Assessing the impact of downtime. The business impact analysis will identify critical data and systems. Note that the importance of data and the importance of systems are not always the same. A system may be more important than the data and vice versa. Issues you should consider fall under the following categories. People. How will you notify them of the incident and the impact? How will you evacuate, transport, and care for employees, including paying them? Systems. What portions of your computing and telecommunications infrastructure must you duplicate immediately? How long do you have? Data. What data is critical to running your business? Property. What items are essential to your business? So now let's talk about the business continuity plan. It is a plan designed to help an organization continue to operate during and after a disruption. It covers all functions of a business, IT systems, facilities, and personnel. Generally includes only mission-critical systems. The components of the plan itself are the purpose and scope, the assumptions and planning principles, system description and architecture, and responsibilities. The plan must be updated and regularly maintained. You must also update and maintain the inventory and configuration lists for systems and applications. Some firms do this annually. Others choose different periods. In addition to schedule reviews, any major changes to the company should trigger a review. Besides benefits of having an up-to-date plan, testing and planning revisions are excellent ways to train new employees. Now let's talk about the disaster recovery plan. It includes the specific steps and procedures to recover from a disaster. It's part of a business continuity plan. Important terms that have already been discussed. The critical business function. Any function considered vital to an organization. If the critical business function fails, the organization will lose the ability to perform critical operations necessary to meet its mission. Individual IT systems and services support critical business functions. The maximum acceptable outage, or MAO. This is the maximum amount of time a system or service can be down before affecting the organization's mission. This directly affects the required recovery time. In other words, the system must be recoverable before the MAO time is reached. Recovery time objectives. RTO, the time when a system or function must be recovered. The RTO is equal to or less than the MAO. For example, if the MAO is 10 minutes, the RTO is 10 minutes or less. And here we have a tornado, but that's a disaster. The components of it include the purpose and scope, disaster or emergency declaration, communications, and emergency response and activities. It usually includes details about hot, warm, and cold sites. It also includes recovery steps and procedures, critical business operations, recovery operations, critical operations, customer service, and operations recovery. Testing the plan. You should not accept any business continuity plan or disaster recovery plan without thorough testing, which helps to ensure the plan will work and that you will meet the CBF, MTD, RPO, and RTO objectives. There are several different types of tests, and we'll talk about each one. Checklist test, structured walkthrough test, simulation test, parallel test, and full interruption test. The checklist test. Simple review of the plan by managers and business continuity team to make sure that contact numbers are current and the plan reflects the company's priorities and structure. This is kind of a desk check. Each team member checks his or her portion of the plan while sitting at their desks, literally. Structured walkthrough test. This is a tabletop exercise. During this test, a team of representatives from each department should do the following. Members present their portion of the plan to other teams. They review goals of the plan for completeness and correctness. Affirm the scope of the plan as well as any assumptions made. Look for overlaps and gaps. Review the structure of the organization as well as the reporting communication structure. Evaluate the testing, maintenance, and training requirements. Conduct a number of scenario-based exercises to evaluate the plan's effectiveness, and meet to step through the plan together in a structured manner. In the final step, team members should act as though they are executing the plan for a certain type of incident. The goal of the structured walkthrough is to find errors in each department's plans, such as gaps or overlaps. Then we have simulation test. More than a paper exercise, requires more planning than a walkthrough. All members of the staff involved in the operations procedures participate in the test. It includes staff reaction and response times, inefficiencies or previously unidentified vulnerabilities. You conduct the simulation on-site using only countermeasures defined in the plan. Simulation test involves many of the employees who have not yet participated in plan development. It's common to conduct simulations on an off day, such as a weekend. The purpose of the test is to identify shortcomings. Then you have a parallel full interruption test. This is conducted at an alternate site. It's the same as a full interruption test, except that the processing does not stop at the primary site. I know it's a parallel test. Some key points in a parallel test. It's an operational test, so it will not include representatives from human resources, purchasing, etc. It will cost a significant amount of money to activate the alternate site. You compare the results of the test with the processing at the original site. A gap analysis exposes any weaknesses or underperformance that requires attention, and usually auditors are involved at every step to monitor the success and make sure that a parallel run data isn't mixed into normal operational data. And lastly, a full interruption test. The most common way to conduct this is at the alternate site. It is so disruptive that few organizations conduct it. During the test, you must shut down the original system for the duration of the test. So this is the end of part 3. Part 4 will talk about backing up data and disaster recovery.